Zanimivo je, da je branje v svojih začetkih v bistvu zahtevalo zelo prisilne telesne drže. Recimo tudi v šoli so nas učili nekega sedenja, ki je v bistvu bilo mučno in nas je v bistvu telesno izčrpavalo. Vi govorite seveda o tem, da je najlepše brati leže, jaz se tu ne moram druga kot strinjati. Zanimivo, da so branje povezali z fizično prisilo. Kako bi to interpretirali?
You all know the story of the paradise. In a certain sense, paradise, what gets lost when you leave paradise is ignorance. And the competence of, or acquiring the skills of reading is akin to leaving paradise. It has this corruptive force. You can no longer really return to a state where you did not know how to read. It's a loss of innocence, it's a loss of ignorance. And yet you gain so much more. And I think that the bodily posture has a few things to do with this. I remember myself at the age of 6, 7, as the president also did, when you begin really seriously to invest yourself in literature, not particularly important literature, but the act of reading somehow takes on a new significance. And it goes along with this loss of innocence. I happen to have a daughter who is at that very age at the moment. And I realize that when she needs to learn something, we always sit. We read, from one side of the page to the other. But what really thrills her is when we lie in bed reading. And somehow it seems as if there is a subterranean, underground work being performed at the same time at which you're really delightfully forgetting yourself. And I can see no other bodily correlate to this than the horizontal attitude. It seems to me striking that I can't really conceive, and perhaps you can, I doubt it though, that you can read one of these management edifying handbooks while lying in bed. You don't. You sit up, and in some way you realize, you internalize the demands of acquiring a skill, acquiring a competence, and somehow that's part, your bodily reaction shows that it's part of work, it's something you have to acquire. Whereas this delightful reading and rereading, and what do you do with a child at the age of 6? You always reread the same stories, and damn you if you forget one word that the young human being next to you remembers from the previous reading, and that has none of these trappings, none of these interiorized disciplinary bodily gestures.
Kaj pa, kadar bere avtor v javnem nastopu, je takrat ta prisila telesa, oziroma ta energija, ki ga da v ta performativni del, a je to nekaj, kar vam kot pisatelju ustreza, ali pa ste tako kot mnogi, ki se raje izognejo dejanskemu nastopu?
Oh, I enjoy them very much, but I never lie down when I read. There is a metaphor, there is an anecdote in a management handbook that I once read, devoted to post-heroic management. And it's imported from Japan. And it poses the question, how to impart knowledge to greater bodies of people, of human beings. Well, the anecdote goes something like this. If you take a frog and you introduce the frog into a vessel with hot water, with boiling water, you will immediately be shocked by the new environment and jump out. That, for me, is an image of avant-garde literature. It wants to shock the system. Well, we've had 100 years of boiling literature. I doubt we need it anymore. If you take the same frog and introduce it into a vessel with lukewarm water, and then you skillfully turn up the heat, the frog will actually stay in the vessel and boil to death. I'm not saying that good literature boils its readers to death, but good literature always confronts the reader with his or her own mortality. And I think that's a merit that perhaps not too many management handbooks will actually be able to tout for themselves.
Kaj pa interpretacija, če smo bili zdaj pri tej, da rečem, performativnem delu, kaj pa vsebinska interpretacija? Tukaj v Vilenici je bila moja mogoče najbolj pomembna izkušnja to, da so avtorji, ki so sami brali svoja dela, v bistvu podajali interpretacije, ki jih jaz kot bralka sploh nisem imela. In to je seveda pri poeziji mogoče še toliko bolj pomembno. A je avtor sam sebi najboljši interpret, da rečem?
That's a delicate question. In a room full of authors, I thought you want to hear my answer. No, seriously, I think that it really depends on the person in question. Some people are very uncomfortable reading their own work, and I think one has to not only accept it, but rejoice in this very fact. I think writing has this dual nature, somehow embedded in its own DNA. You write books because you don't want to meet the audience straightforward. It's a roundabout form of communication. The book serves both as a connector between you and the audience and as a kind of shield behind which you can disappear as a writer. And those writers who, and I think you have to accept this, and it's part of the writerly process, part of the writerly psyche. And some writers are better than others, let's put it that way, jumping over this obstacle that their book constitutes and strike this chord with the audience, and others are not. It's just a sort of different setups, mental setups. One is not better than the other. And finally, ultimately, the reason why we want to hear a writer read may not necessarily be the most laudable reason. We usually want to get something from the writer that the book doesn't seem to provide us with. Well, perhaps one should consider readings by writers slightly different in generic terms than what it means actually to write and produce a book. More like a performance.
Na vsak način se mi zdi, da je to branje lahko tako korist poeziji kot v njeno škodo. Da lahko avtor v bistvu svojo interpretacijo tudi na nek način uniči tisto, kar je bralec sam prebral.